Hope you're doing great. Good morning, world, double B. Indeed, good morning, Nick. Good day, friends. Indeed. Joseph Norwood. Good morning to all Argentines. Do Bitcoin. We're going to be talking a little bit about Argentina today. We definitely are. Ben, good morning, team. Robert. Good morning. It's Saturday. Indeed, Saturday. Saturn, we could talk about the black sun at some point, but we won't today. It's not a black sun day, right? Joe, happy Saturday. We love Saturday. We're having a little bit of a dinner party at my house tonight. So we won't be going all morning. I've got to help my wife by watching the kids and doing kid stuff while she prepares a delicious dinner for my friends who are all coming over tonight. And we're going to have a great time. King Mansa Musa. Good morning, Bitcoin. Let's be energy efficient today. Indeed. We got up early, so we've already got some stuff to make up for, right? Good morning, peeps. Indeed, the sun this morning, let me just give you all a heads up here in Montreal. It's up. It's gray. It's dark. I slept in today. Weird, because it was dark enough. I can already start seeing the time change, by the way. Up here in the north, it comes quicker. But that doesn't matter, right? Because Bitcoin blocks are the same speed all the time, 10 minutes. So who cares about how fast the sun goes up and goes down, as long as it goes up and down and Bitcoin is running. So all that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. All right. So you're here for some fake news, I think, right? What's the fakest news I could find today? What is it? My notes came in a little weird today, but that's okay. I've got it all here. So the UK birth slump, dubbed "good for the planet," as number of babies born hits a 20-year low. It's good for the planet, guys. England not having kids. Jeez, we couldn't do better than that. That's awesome. The moon is also coming under. I was talking about Saturn 2 seconds ago, but it looks like the moon is getting its own troubles, right? So this is what NBC is letting us know, right? Climate in crisis. The moon's natural wobble alters Earth's tides. With climate change, that's bad news. Okay, so the moon is now the enemy, guys. The moon. All right. You don't want the moon. Climate change and the moon are now related. Now, here's someone who put a compilation together. You've heard some of these before, right? You've heard some of these. These are COVID ones. But this is just, it's just a coincidence, everyone. But all the mainstream media is letting you know COVID's coming. Here's what they say, right? In the UK, new COVID strain hits UK. 4 of the key symptoms to look out for. CBS News, CDC tracking new COVID variant BA.2.86 after highly mutated strain reported in Michigan. Fortune tells us highly mutated, the teenage mutant ninja COVID, highly mutated COVID variant BA.2, highly mutated. I hadn't even seen that yet. Has been detected in the US. Why? The CDC and WHO are monitoring it. CDC is tracking a new lineage of the virus that causes COVID-19. This lineage is named BA.2.86 and has been detected in the United States, Denmark, and Israel. CDC is gathering more information and will share more about this lineage. Independent new COVID mutation found in UK as fears grow of surge in cases. Canada, of course, has to get in the worrying gang. Cases have been identified in the US, Denmark, and the UK. Canada is monitoring the new COVID variant. NBC News, global disease experts are monitoring a new COVID variant that carries a large number of mutations. Mutants are coming. Meanwhile, it looks significantly different from the original version of Omicron and the previously dominant strain targeted by upcoming COVID booster shots. World News tonight, ABC World News. The CDC says it's tracking a new lineage of virus that causes COVID-19 after it was detected in the US. New super mutant COVID strain emerges. Is this the next global threat? Well, if you saw anything on Twitter, Alex Jones giving a prediction today. If you want to hear an Alex Jones prediction, it's an excellent one. Happy to hear it. So Alex Jones, others sharing the information that he has found out that the Biden admin is preparing a to bring back full COVID restrictions by mid-September. And we're going to be doing the masks, they say, no travel. Now, what's his name? Alex Jones said he would kiss the ground or something like that if it doesn't happen by October. So he's predicting this hard, and this is, sort of verified in his world advice. So look, Alex Jones usually gets this stuff right. I just don't. Do you see compliance this time around? Maybe. I think they're going to have to. Can't wait to see Fauci on TV. Who are they going to? How are they going to do it? I don't know. Maybe they can. I mean, Canada for sure. I mean, people are so stupid here. It's going to work. But in the United States, really, is it going to work again? Maybe. But what I see right now is, and that's our theme for the day, the reboot on our necks. What I see out there is sort of just a general, it feels like a reboot. It feels like we hit reset and people's brains are sort of reconstituting and reformulating over the summer. The Hollywood strike, the no late night talk show brainwashing. It looks like the brainwashing fight is starting to shift from left and right to what it always ought to have been, what Bitcoiners recognize, rich and poor, right? It's always been. When Bitcoiners can recognize the orange-green debate, but it's better to be seen in terms of rich and poor, right? That's the more accurate way of seeing it, as far as I can tell. Now, orange and green help us compartmentalize and shrink the size of and the magnitude of this debate. But it is that, right? It's rich and poor. That's what we saw from the Richmond, North of Richmond watch videos that we were talking about all week now. That what you could see there was the brainwashing that quickly. It doesn't take much, right? Because brainwashing is an artifice put on top of what you're feeling and even thinking, right? Because there's two sides of the brain, and you can manipulate both sides, sure, but when you try and just put words and like a thin film of logic and human intelligence, and you try to tape it on to someone's thoughts, it can fall off really easily when they see through it. And that's what the Richmond, North of Richmond thing did, right? And that's what was so interesting about the reaction videos, and why it was neat to see it happen across the spectrum, black, white, everyone was in that video, the compilation of reaction videos that we've been talking about. But another one came out today, right? And it's not reaction videos to Richmond, North of Richmond, but it's another video that looks similar in this sense. So it's from A More Perfect Union. And what they did was they sent a liberal, like a left-wing kind of guy, right? He had a mullet and just looks like a typical Brooklyn guy, but he's from a small town, I guess. I didn't really get his whole story. But what he does is he goes to Erie, Pennsylvania, or maybe somewhere in Ohio, but around there. It's like the Pennsylvania, Ohio type of area. And he goes to a Trump rally, which happened the other day. And he just interviews people and just talks to them, right? So this is what he says, right? So this would be your typical liberal type of person who election cycle ago was 100% probably a Bernie bro, and was still trying to compete and fight in mainstream media, and probably thought Trump was Hitler, as he had been told 100,000 times, right? So here he is. He goes to the Trump rally, and this is what he says, right? We visited a Trump rally to talk with supporters about economic policy and corporate power. What's clear is, despite some irreconcilable differences between us, there's an aggressive pro-worker economic agenda that appeals to Americans across the political spectrum. So the interview is pretty neat, right? The guy comes in and says, for all the focus on culture war issues, for all the focus on these kinds of things, the working class on the left and right have way more in common. And if you watch the video and you see him coming to that conclusion, it becomes very clear, right? And it really, I think anyway, for me, when I see Richmond, North of Richmond, when I see videos like this, we can start to see how this realignment is happening before our eyes, right? And it kind of feels like a complete reboot. And now, remember when we were talking today, what's the new plan that they can come up with? Well, it could be another COVID thing. But again, you need players. You need playable characters, right? So yesterday there was a really neat, and to me, this is sort of how you can see that the brainwashing is starting to come to an end, right? because you just watch the fights, right? So yesterday, Vivek, who keeps doing just absolute God's work, right? You know what he did yesterday? So he does Tucker a couple days ago. It was a big hit. He does all these shows. He went on to Jim Acosta's show yesterday. Jim Acosta, absolutely one of the most partisan hacks you're going to find on in Washington D.C. He used to be the press pool reporter when Trump was there, and now he was the one that Trump always picked on. They always fought. I think he banned him for a little while because he's so nuts. He was the one that the mainstream news tried to laud it as the enemy of the people because he wrote the book about being the enemy of the people or something, and it was so hard being a journalist. Meanwhile, the only one who's really like that is Julian Assange, of course, right? Who has the right to complain about how hard it is to actually be a journalist. And so, of course, Acosta never even spoken about Julian Assange. And yesterday, that was the interesting thing. So he tries to corner Vivek, right? And what I saw is exactly what we're mentioning here about this brain rebooting and the capacity of each side to fight as we realign towards orange and green from red and blue. To see the world in terms of the red and blue dichotomy, you have to have someone who like shepherds you there and pushes you to see those binaries. So that means Jim Acosta has to be good at what he does, right? Well, he got his ass kicked. It was just a wiping. The only thing Jim Acosta could do, because he's not as smart as Vivek, is do the serious face. So if you watch it, it's just Jim trying to be like, I'm so serious. And you could see he's trying to like hide a smirk sometimes because, again, the only weapons he has are these silly, old-fashioned condescension and a bit of arrogance, but nothing. Of course, it doesn't impede Vivek. And you could already see Vivek is not even really engaged to persuade him. He's like, you're not quite worth it. Like, I'm going to ignore the smiles. I'm going to ignore the smirks. But here's what he said, right? He goes and says, I'm pardoning Julian Assange right away. I'm pardoning Ross Ulbricht right away. I'm pardoning Trump right away, right? And, Acosta, he doesn't know what to do, right? He doesn't know what to do. Then he also tries to get him cornered on the Russia question, right? So Jim Acosta, smirking, says, during my interview with Ramaswamy, he reiterated his position that he would allow Putin to keep parts of Ukraine, block Ukraine from joining NATO, and even visit Putin in Moscow. Jeez. The GOP contender added, our goal should not be for Putin to lose. And so he's saying this as in, like, what a moron, what an idiot, what a stupid person, right? But of course, most Americans are aligned with what he's saying. So the capacity to brainwash is nowhere what it was previous to 2020. It's not even close. It's not even in the same planet anymore, right? This summer, there has been so much subtle rebooting, and it could be a change in the collective unconscious. I don't know what it is, right? It's just, you can see it. You can see it everywhere. The mental health of Americans is actually going up. It's actually going up this summer. Like I said, it could be that there's a Hollywood writer's strike and you can't get the brainwashing apparatus running at full speed. I do think that has a role to play here. And then the news, of course, just being more and more laughable and less relevant. Even Fox, right? Fox is about to get its ass kicked next week. So did you hear this story? So Fox is trying to host the debate for the Republicans. Vivek's going to be there. It's probably going to be entertaining. People are going to probably watch it. It's probably going to be interesting. But instead, Trump, who's not going, right, ends up scheduling his interview with Tucker at the exact same time. So Tucker, who was fired by Fox, is now going to be able to wipe Fox off the viewership numbers on what was supposed to be a big viewed event, the Republican debate. I actually did a funny thing this weekend. DeLeon, that guy who moved to Miami as a VC from San Francisco during the lockdowns when he went for a little vacation to Miami. He said, we should just move Silicon Valley to Miami. And the mayor is like, do it. And then he became kind of famous for it. So he shared last night, he rewatched because it was 8 years ago, just the other day. Yeah, it was the 2015 debate where Trump and the other candidates, it was the one where he did the Rosie O'Donnell, right? Megyn Kelly said to him, you call women fat pigs and slobs. And Trump, this is one of those ones where you have to love him, right? Because the audience was already hostile towards him, right? He was getting booed because he wouldn't endorse any Republican. The first question to him was, "Do you promise to endorse any Republican who wins?" And he's like, "No, I'm not giving that kind of leverage. What are you talking about? Like, if it's Jeb Bush, I'm not going to endorse this idiot." So that's the one where Trump has the only escape hatch. That question that Megyn Kelly had for him was an impossible question to win, right? It's the old, when are you going to stop beating your wife question, right? Any way you answer, you're screwed, right? But only Trump came up with the one way out, which was to put it all on Rosie O'Donnell, who nobody likes, right? So only Rosie O'Donnell. But what's amazing is if you actually watch this whole program, I didn't watch it all. I just to get into the vibe. Now, I remember listening to this live. I was driving my car. I just got back from my honeymoon, if I recall. I think Ethereum had just launched, and I was like going to, because I was, the co-work space that I was working in was where Ethereum had launched from. So I don't know what I was doing. I was going back and forth for something between Ottawa and Toronto and Canada, and I just put it on my radio, and I listened to the debate the whole ride, and I can still remember just cracking up the whole time, thinking how funny Trump was, and the whole thing was great. So, but if you go back and watch it, you see how captured we all were by this format, by the frame, by the idea. It was like sports or something, and that's fine. But you don't even realize the type of persuasion that's going on when you're in it. Now that there are these other avenues, because at the time you couldn't really get quality political information, or at least it wasn't filled with people creating their own content on Twitter and on YouTube. There were people like Sticks, X, and Hammer, of course. I was already following some of these people back then. But it was nowhere near as pervasive as it has become, right? I've even gone back and watched, I was a big Shoe on Head YouTube fan at that time, and even her content from back then looks like a different planet. Like, you had to put up with really low quality video. It was fine for the time, but you could see the difference between the big American cable news networks versus independent people. That is gone now, right? You can't tell the difference between a Tucker interview on his own or a Tucker interview with Fox, except it's a little better now that he doesn't even have to consider what Fox editors and producers are thinking. So when you see Vivek now on these platforms, the energy is so much lower than it would have been on now that he's on CNN this time, than it would have been 8 years ago, right? It would have been a much bigger deal had he been on it 8 years ago. Now he's like, "All right, Jim, like, I gave you a bit of chance here to interview me. You're really stupid. I'm just doing this to get some content out there, but you're an idiot." So he gets more out of visiting podcasts, just like Kennedy predicted, right? Kennedy predicted that the 2024 election would be all about the podcasts and the independent content producers, versus what happened in 2016 in the end was more mimetic and more trolling and fun, and Trump dominating Twitter. Twitter was a big deal. I'm not saying Twitter is not going to be a big deal. The next one, it will be. Twitter is the platform for all these independent content creators, but now their actual content is so much richer, so much more diverse, so much more interesting. So you can tell right away that these old systems are simply not going to work again. And that's why when I hear things like, "Oh, COVID variant again," with the amount of rebooting that's gone on this summer and since COVID in general, and Hunter Biden, the 2020 election, and all this stuff, I just don't see compliance coming to America like it did. I can see way more people just not putting up with 1 minute of it, not a minute. Right now, of course, New York people, right? But they're too busy getting robbed to go outside anyway. Who cares if they stay indoors, right? It doesn't matter. So you can start to see this realignment. There's other ones too. You take this the Millet guy, the fella in Argentina, right? And you watch his interviews, and he is just torching the mainstream press people. Because remember, the Jim Acostas and all these guys, they were chosen because they look like the guy on top of a wedding cake, right? That was like literally the whole criteria for most of these guys. That guy on ABC, most of the people on NBC, Rachel Maddow, right? They all look like the groom on a wedding cake. And that was generally one of the criteria before, because you read the questions, you had producers, you weren't really the heart of the questioning. But Joe Rogan and all these other guys changed the model, so the person actually asking the questions has to understand the question in the first place, right? They have to be a lot more talented than a Jim Acosta, for example. So you watch this guy just absolutely torch people, right? And everything he's saying looks like this shift where people are starting to see the world between poor and rich, not red and blue. And he talks about where the political parasites have existed for all these years and what a problem these people who don't produce anything are for the people who do produce things. So he's just another one of these guys who he's not being polite about socialism and communism, right? He's explicitly saying Argentina is a shithole country because of these know-it-alls, and because what we did to pay for the know-it-alls meant that we threw away our whole system. America is doing the exact same thing with the Hunter Biden thing and the manipulation of the justice system. Remember that the U.S. justice system is more or less its crown jewel, right? The reason why people do business in America is because the results are predictable, because the courts are supposed to be the best. They're not, right? I think they're salvageable. I think they are salvageable. And again, I'm 100% bullish on America. But what I see here is this rebooting, and you can see it sort of around the world, right? That's the good news. Even the tensions between China and America, there was a guy who had a whole, just to show you how deep the brainwashing is in America for what's going on in China. There was a guy who had a whole piece about driving through China on his motorbike the other day. Let me find it. So he drives through all of China on his motorbike, and he made some, pretty good observations. He said, look, you could say that that China is this and that, but I never got stopped by police for anything. I never saw the social credit system anywhere, right? No one cared about what I did and said. And he goes, do you think that would be the same in America? If I drove my bike across America, you think I wouldn't see a police officer? Right? You think I wouldn't get questioned or in any of those things? I can't find the thread, but it's an excellent one, right? Just talking about how so many of our ideas about what's going on in China are absolutely from the brainwashing system, right? Now, I don't want to live in the Chinese system, and I have no love lost at all for the CCP. I think they're terrible, and I would drop a couple of them from space if I had the choice. So no fan of the Chinese Communist Party, obviously. But again, when the world realigns from right to left, or even the old Leninist, because the difference between Marxism and Leninism, right? So in Marxism, it was this class struggle, but that wasn't going to be that helpful as far as keeping people pitted against each other. Lenin tried the new one, right? Which was the problem in the history of the world is actually the countries fighting. So that's why we need a one world government and this and that, and that's why we need a Soviet, gang. So his whole thing was the conflict between countries themselves, right? So that form of division has not gone away since Lenin's time. Now, I'm not saying Lenin invented it, right? I'm not even saying it's not true. Of course, countries can disagree. But the degree to which we disagree and think the Chinese villains or dupes or any of these things, why do they live in their stupid communist system? Why don't they revolt, right? Oh, Americans are more freedom loving than Chinese, which might be true, right? I'm not going to argue any of those things, but I don't think anyone wants to live in a totalitarian shithole. And the Chinese, I don't think, are that different from Americans, and it looks like they're starting to figure that out. So they've got the situation in China with the economy now is really starting to put this in focus, right? So here's what Andreas Steno Larson, who does a bit of Chinese analysis, says. He goes, everyone and everything is about the Chinese real estate complex at the moment. But what is actually going on? He says, the Chinese growth model has evolved into a model of overinvestment. In short, the economy cannot absorb the level of investment it is being imposed from Beijing. The overinvestment has fueled real estate and infrastructure, resulting in ghost cities and bridges to nowhere. The CCP and Xi in particular is trying to reform the economy away from the overinvestment model. That is essentially what the Evergrande debacle was about, an attempt at a controlled demolition. As a result, housing prices have started to plummet, and only now housing starts have plummeted. Only now so have prices, he says. CCP deals with wary consumers and businesses expecting asset prices to decline, hindering both debt and investment, which dampens China's reopening momentum. Meanwhile, the large export sector is facing less demand and production is fairly stagnant. And of course, there's the youth question as well, right? The youth being, they have the lie flat movement, right? Where they don't want to do anything and they're just going to be lazy. Now, I don't know how much of that is propaganda. Even the idea of what's going on online in China, right? So here's Jonathan Cheng talking about it. He says communist propaganda has played down the young generation's jobless woes. The Economic Daily, a party newspaper, said in July that many youngsters were simply choosing slow employment, a phrase that was widely mocked online, right? So that's a little bit like those jobs that we have in America too, where you don't do anything, right? The do nothing jobs, right? And then of course everything you see on Chinese media now that's propagandistic, or everything in Chinese media is propagandistic, and it's mostly about this sort of macho chauvinistic thing that we've been talking about, right? It's kind of like a rah American approach, but the Chinese people aren't buying it. Right? No, there's 1 billion people, so I'm sure some are. But again, I think China is experiencing a very similar realignment to what America is experiencing. And if that's the case, then the realignment of red and blue, or communist and capitalist, and all of these ridiculous divisions that have been heaped upon humanity for the past 80 years will melt away and turn into something like, do you manipulate and control the money for your own benefit, or are you one of the people who get the short end of the stick from the manipulation, right? It's the haves, haves not, establishment, anti-establishment, which is perfect for Bitcoin, because that's exactly the world we want to talk about. That's exactly the alignment that we're comfortable with, right? We don't have to shift you from the fake debate about what's going on with trans people and push you into economic debate. The economic debate, just like war, comes to you. You don't have a choice in the end, right? If we have the kind of fall off the cliff moment it looks like we're going to have in the economy, then people are going to be naturally inclined to see the divisions in the world between rich and poor. And if that happens, our strength is just much greater, right? Like the strength of all these Chinese people and all these American people and all of these Russian people combined is enough to win and change the world. And it looks like that's what's going on, right? The American media simply cannot keep a lid on this realignment from happening. And it looks like a reboot is happening in American minds everywhere. And the more we see these things, I think the more it's going to be like that, right? You get even Jake Tapper yesterday on CNN had to admit that Trump, he said it out loud for real, that Trump was right in the debates about Hunter Biden taking millions of dollars from the Chinese. He said it, right? He says that Joe Biden lied about Hunter and Trump was right about Hunter taking millions from China, right? Now, of course, the first reactions to this was, this is going to be a problem because Republicans are, like, if you watch the video, right? The first reaction is, Republicans aren't going to let this one go. Well, what? Of course we're not. Of course, no one's going to let this go. You had the president who is clearly compromised. He's compromised. That's what it looks like, right? He's compromised. He can't do anything. In China, Ukraine, Russia, anyone can spill the beans on this guy. And therefore, he's got to do what they say, which is what a lot of people think is what explains what is happening at the border, right? If you saw RFK's documentary when he went down to the border and said, I laughed at Trump about this border thing, right? What I see is the only way to explain what's happening is that the president is compromised, because there's no objective. Like, again, could you imagine, like, would you take the bet that all these people coming and then you stole their daughters and you stole their wives and now they're just going to be liberal voters because that's what happened? No, most of the people coming anyway are probably more conservative, getting away from their shithole situation in Africa or Asia. You know, a lot of Chinese people coming in the Mexican border crossings. So, and the coyotes who do it, right? The people who shepherd you, that organization has gone international. Like that's what RFK said. These are not Central Americans coming anymore, or Latin Americans. They're coming from everywhere. And again, why do you think they're coming? Right? Like, their country probably sucks. They probably know the difference between a government that helps you and a government that hurts you. And even myself, the reason why I so easily became small government years ago is just seeing the Quebec situation that I grew up in, where the ambitions of different politicians meant we had economic crises in the 90s when the rest of North America was doing great, like a boom time, right? So while everyone else was booming in North America, Quebec had no money at all, because we put politics first. We put the stupid political ambitions of Quebec politicians way beyond the needs of the people, to the point where they were like, okay, everyone move who doesn't like it, right? And I never wanted to leave Quebec in my whole life, but what choice did I have when I was a young man? Because the economy sucked so bad here that you couldn't stick around, right? Now I'm 100% down with the separation stuff, but it's not to make a president and the egos of a bunch of Quebecois who have political ambitions flattered. I don't do it for that, right? I do it because it seems easier to manage a small and have influence and have a smaller scale government if you shrink the entire situation, right? It's easier for me, and I had a lot of influence when I worked in Ottawa, in Canada, in the capital. But still, it's easier if it's just a small province of, what's Quebec, 8 million people or something. It's not a huge place, right? And we have all the institutions we need. I don't care about Canada anymore. But it's, again, not to make a king or a president out of a French Canadian like that. I'm sure we'll get a president or whatever happens if Quebec separates, but I don't like, that's not why I'm doing it, right? It's not an ego, it's not a flattery thing. It's just practicality. It's just easier to run a small place. And I don't really know why I have to consider what's going on in British Columbia when I make decisions about what's happening in Quebec for our small little political situation, right? So that's an insight that I think a lot of people are about to get, right? The argument that the government mostly just does terrible things as long as they're at a certain scale in your world. So there you go. Just wanted to mention, we got P-Man to defend French-only speaking Quebecers. They are as easily. Oh yeah, they're really dumb. P-Man, don't get me wrong, right? Very easily manipulated and duped, and have been for a long time. So again, I'm not a separatist that wants to see the Parti Québécois in Quebec do well, if that means anything, right? I'm for separation, but not for any of the people currently asking for it, because I've met a lot of those people. They really, Conrad Black had it right when he talked about, because I met Parizeau, lived in my town. Jacques Parizeau lives when he was alive, lived in Brome Lake, where I'm from. I saw him. I served him in a restaurant most of the time he was premier of Quebec. All right, like I was a teenage busboy while he was premier. So I met him many times, and he, I went to law school in Laval. He came and gave a speech. I met him there too. I'm actually more a fan of him now than I was back then, right? Now, because he was right. The money, I'll let everyone in on a Quebec chat for a second, all right? Because I like Quebec chats. So when there was a referendum in 1995, and it was super scammy and everybody cheated, right? So the numbers don't matter. There was basically a tie, but to stay in Canada won by like 0.5%. Everybody cheated though. Okay, so it was a totally cheat election. But one of the things that stood out was the slogans. We, yes, was to make Quebec a country. No was to stay with Canada. The yes signs in the O, right? You spell yes in French, O-U-I. The O was often used as a logo for the ad. So O could be a peace sign, a daisy was one of them. But a really important one was the $1 coin, the loonie, right? The loonie is the $1 coin in Canada. It's got a loon on it. It's a gold coin. It's $1. And they put the $1 coin on the we, and Canadians lost their minds, right? You can't take our money. You can't use our money if you quit. And then, of course, they said, oh, the Quebecers are all racist and they're all ethnic people. It's an ethnic thing, which is somewhat true, right? It's somewhat true, but it wasn't totally the vision, right? So when they lost on the night of the referendum, the Premier of Quebec, Jacques Parizeau, gave a speech and said, the reason we lost, the reason why we can't have a country is because of the money and the ethnic vote. Now, this was apparently the worst thing you could have ever said, right? They said forever Quebecers are racist, they're so terrible. But and even I was like, holy Moses, what did he say? Right. And indeed you'd say, oh, I for years I said I can't be around those racist people. But once you see how racist politics are manipulated, you can kind of see that Parizeau had a point, right? It was the money. Like, of course, they had the right to use the Canadian dollar. What were we going to do? What were Canadians going to do? They were going to go into Quebec if they voted yes and rip the dollars out of their hands? No, it was their money to use. Why would they have to not use it? So already over time, especially with Bitcoin, I've become pretty convinced that Parizeau was right. It was money and it was the ethnic vote. Now, I get why it happened that way. And by was the ethnic vote, the way he said it, it was ethnic politics. It was the division politics that we recognize all too clearly as fabricated now, right? He almost was naive to think that he could get away with this stuff without seeing those weapons used. So I became convinced. It took me a while to become convinced that the whole ethnic thing was literally just a smear and not real, right? So it was a smear and it worked. So when he says that smear worked, that's what he was saying, right? But of course, the money part is a major issue, but that's the good news for the Quebecers. And that's what I realized. Of course, it was the fake money system that kept the country together, because the fear mongering about the money was what led most Quebecers who were like, I kind of don't see the point of Canada. But the money thing was like, oh, I don't want to hurt my real estate value or something. That's what kept stupid Canada together in the end. So the money and the ethnic vote. Yeah. Money and the ethnic vote. Yeah. So now I don't want to give the Quebecers too much credit on this, right? Because the one of the main problems in Quebec is that the whole argument about strengthening the French language usually just results in limiting English, right? They don't really care about strengthening the French. Now, I would have no problem with any policy, any idea, any system to strengthen French. And they do it in some ways, like the French lessons in Quebec are free across the province for people who move here, or for English people. And English people, I always encourage them. I don't take that. Like, I speak French really well, always have my whole life. So the idea here is that the Quebecers, the ones that get too hyped up about this language stuff, really believe that they are defending their country by attacking English and limiting English. This is unforgivable on their part, because it just makes their own population stupid. And you know how hard it is for Quebecers to learn English, by the way? It's illegal. It's basically illegal, right? They're not allowed to go to school in English. That's illegal. And they only get their government English courses started when they're about 9 or 10 in public schools. Like, it's that bad. It's really that bad. No kidding. A country like Canada has a situation like that, right? Now, I'm allowed, because I'm born to English parents, I was allowed to go to English school. But if you're not born to English parents, nope, you're going to go to French school. And those are the problems with the Quebec language thing, as far as I can tell. That's where I have no agreement with the separatists who put all of their eggs in those baskets, which are stupid, right? If I was a separatist, an engaged separatist, I would only be about the money. I would be embracing Bitcoin today. And Quebec, if Quebec separatists embraced Bitcoin, they would have a country in like 3 years. 3 years, probably. It wouldn't take long. Imagine if you had a plan B to get out of the stupid Canadian banking situation. The banks are way worse than the American. It's over. It's done. It's not going to make it, right? So that's the good news. Quebec can just say like, oh yeah, remember everything you said about the dollar in 1995? You keep it. It's yours. And you're right. We're not going to take any of it, right? We're going to go to Bitcoin. I could see that happening. I could really see that happening. But the point is, Quebecers are they haven't really necessarily been part of the same left and right dichotomy that the rest of the world has been caught up in. They have been caught up in their own. Are we a country? Aren't we a country? So for years, I thought they were behind for not having a right-wing, left-wing political culture in the province. In the end, and I remember when I went to law school, people who didn't want separation anymore saying, I just wish we had normal right-wing, left-wing politics, not federalism, separation, da, da, da. In the end, Quebec was better off not having the normal brainwashing, and it shows. Like, we don't have any of this trouble. We don't have the mental health thing you have on the streets of other North American cities. We're just not divided. Trump did not derange people here. It's just not happening, right? We've got our own derangement and our own problems, but And Daniel says it's the best place. It should be. I mean, this is why they're so stupid. They're very, as many good things as I'm saying about Quebec, right? Very insular, especially the know-it-alls, especially the people who run Hydro-Quebec. Hydro-Quebec is the largest public utility on Earth, on the planet. And they can't figure this shit out, right? Imagine you have the largest public utility on planet Earth. Their electrical capacity is greater than like Texas if they felt like it. If they put a bit of pedal to the metal, they have more than enough. But we have infinite amounts of whatever we need here in Quebec. Like it's absolute paradise, right? The amount of rivers that can be turned into hydroelectric dams, no one on the planet has what we have. Chile maybe, but I don't think it's not the same, right? So they got the big mountains, but we don't. We got just so much happening, and it's a big place, right? So that's my Quebec rant. So the point, though, is the reboot is happening across the spectrum, right? It's happening around the world, and by being able to focus things into these conversations, not rich and poor, right? Sorry, not right and left, rich and poor instead. That's what you start to see as far as where this stuff is headed, right? If this keeps going, it's perfect for Bitcoin because it's familiar ground. This is the ground we want to be fighting on. We don't want to be fighting on a separate battlefield filled with all these ridiculous arguments that are just put there to create false division. So the reaction videos of Richmond, north of Richmond, to me, start to talk about how people are opening their eyes and the brainwashing is falling away. This video of the fellow, of a liberal guy going to a Trump rally, if this shit catches on, and I do, you know what I remember? I was just thinking about this last night. I remember the summer of 2017, and it was getting close. In my office in New York City, right? In my office in New York City, because I was never a shy Trump supporter. Like I never was quiet, right? We had a little WeWork in New York City. We were the original CoinDesk team. We were coming into the bull market, and our office was only like 8 or 9 people, right? And I'd say we were like half, right? There was like 5 big Trumpers and you know, maybe 4 not Trumpers. It was just enough to not be annoying. And what we would do is it became so normal. We were playing all the Trump memes that summer, the summer of 2017. We had you remember the song, I Wouldn't Go to France? Remember he said that line, I wouldn't go to France. Go to YouTube and see this video. It's hilarious. France. I wouldn't go to France. The other one, Billions, right? Billions and billions and billions and billions and billions. It was like another one of these songs. China, the China super cut, right? China. We were just listening to Trump memes all summer. And even the people who hated Trump that summer were starting to be okay with laughing about him. And I could see it, right? Oh yeah, now I'm kind of getting it. But then of course Charlottesville happens. And then that was the end of being able to talk about Trump in the office like casually. Right, that was over. Like overnight, it was over. I couldn't put on the videos that I thought were funny, even though I didn't hear what everyone else heard with Charlottesville, right? We all know now it was a fake news thing. I knew at the time it was fake, but we didn't see it. So that was absolutely a divisive, planted story by Jim Acosta, is one of the people, right, who carried water on this one, called, even though everyone knew he never said those words, he clearly says in the Charlottesville video, I denounce totally the white supremacists. But it was ignored, and they got the results, right? They kept us divided. They kept people arguing. I couldn't play my funny Trump songs in my office anymore. And they were winning people over, as I said, right? You know, once you don't hate Trump, once you're not so weirded out by the true bully nature of his attitude, and you can see past it, then usually you're fine, right? We almost got there. All right, P-Man, what is he saying about Quebec? The energy minister wants citizens to cut down on peerless consumption, but everyone should own an electric car. Yeah, I mean, these are P-Man, they're very dumb people. So I don't want to make it sound like they need a lot of help, right? They need a lot of help in Quebec. Yeah, power consumption, lots of potential, but stupid policies in Quebec. Yeah, I've long predicted that Quebec will be one of the first places to shirk off socialism, right? I think they will. I think that Quebecers are by nature American people, right? They're very American. If you ask a French person who's the most American people in their world, they'll say the Quebecois, right? And so yeah, I think it'll realign on those levels. All right, team. I'm not going to go too long today. I got to go watch the kids. I got some stuff to do. Slow news day as well. These are not smart people. No, they're not. They're not smart, unfortunately. Especially they got like the really low IQ group running Quebec right now, like really dumb, right? You know what their name is? If you want a good laugh, CAC, the CACA, the CAC, CACA. Terrible, like the worst branding. They've been in powerful. I mean, they love lockdown shit and all that, right? Psychos. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I shall see you all not tomorrow. Tomorrow Sunday. We're gonna take it easy. I shall see you all Monday morning. Same time. Same time. Family time is quality. Yeah, caca. Cheers, all. Yeah, I got friends coming over tonight, and I'm gonna have a nice time.